Hello, welcome back to Let's Talk Title with Emerald Coast Title Services. I'm your co-host and president of ECTS, Dion Moniz, and we have our director of operations, co-host, Ashley Bowen. Hello.
Hi. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so
Part 5
of our three-part series on FARBAR versus CRSP.
Yeah, initially we thought we'd get it done in 3 parts, and it got a little longer than we thought, so we're at Part 5, but this is our final part. And we're going to talk about the addenda between FARBAR and CRSP. So why don't we jump in and get started. Let's discuss first, all through these last 4 parts, we've talked about how much longer FARBAR is and stuff that's in FARBAR that's not in CRSP. You got to click the right addenda.
That's right. So we're going to kind of look at those.
Let's go ahead and talk about the addenda that are part of CRSP that are already built into FARBAR.
And when you add all of those additional pages, then your CRSP contract could be, as long, if not longer, than the FARBAR.
Yeah, exactly.
Which you should have wrote your offer in on first place,
right.
In our opinion.
We love FARBAR, and there's a whole contracts class we can come give you to where I can talk you into FARBAR over CRSP. But one of the main differences between the two, amongst the sections that we've gone over through this series, though, that, like Ashley mentioned, is CRSP is 4 pages shorter. And so it looks like it's easier, but by the time you add in all the right addenda to make it the same as FARBAR, it's really the same length. So anyway, if you're on a CRSP, you have to be extra diligent to make sure that you do include the proper addenda that apply, whereas it's already built into FARBAR, so you don't have to be as careful because it's already there.
But there's also differences in the addenda.
Yes.
You've got, the VA FHA addendum versus the VA addendum on CRSP, and there are differences in a lot of these as well, so we'll kind of go over that too.
Yep. So first, the 3 addenda that stand out the most as being already built into FARBAR that are not part of CRSP unless you check the addendum is FERPTA, 1031 exchanges, and rentals. So FERPTA, that's a whole different episode. Actually, that'll be our next episode. We're going to tell you all about FERPTA.
Oh, it'll be so much fun.
What the heck it is, why it applies.
What forms you need to use.
What forms you need. But for FARBAR, there's a whole half-page section under the standards that addresses FERPTA. Whereas if you're on CRSP and you're dealing with a foreign seller, which we'll get into what classifies as a foreign seller next time, but if you have a foreign seller where FERPTA would apply, you have to make sure you check that addendum and include it.
And I can't say this enough, and we'll definitely talk about it next episode, but know who your seller is. And
right.
If you know that your seller is a foreign person, I'd put that in the listing,
Yes.
just so that the other party knows to add that addendum to the contract whenever they put your offer in.
Great point. Yeah. So if you're on buyer side making an offer, it would be good to know that the seller is a foreign person for purposes of including that addendum with the offer.
And these funds are going to be subject to withholding.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Very important.
Yep.
And then the 1031. That is already included in FARBAR. It's an additional addendum in CRSP. If your buyer or seller halfway through the process decide, hey, we want a 1031, the other party could disagree, not want to sign that thing, and that could be a way out or a cause of heartache right in the middle of the transaction. So you don't have to have it in FARBAR, but you do have to have it in CRSP.
Right. So I really can't think of a reason why a seller would be scared away from a 1031 exchange. But in today's hot market...
But you can be.
Sure.
We've got, transaction right now. We've got sellers selling a piece of property to these buyers. They want to 1031 and buy, a beach condo. 1031 sounds great, sounds like cash, but it's also kind of a contingency on the sale of this piece of property because they're not going to be able to... They're not going to have the money unless this one sells.
Yeah, okay, good point.
See, full of them.
You're in the trenches every day, so you get to see these on a daily basis. So yeah, that's a good point. So that would be a reason. So yeah, so if you're on CRSP and suddenly you have this addendum that sticks out, whereas it's already built into FARBAR, that could spoof the seller. And in today's market where there's multiple offers,
you don't want to spoof the sellers.
Right. You want to have the best offer, the cleanest offer, and so if you have an offer with all these addenda attached, by the way, Latin lesson, addendum is singular, addenda is plural.
Oh, I thought you were going to give us a definition.
Well, everyone knows the definition. It means
Okay.
an add-on, but anyway. All right, so we went over FERC 10, 1031 exchanges.
And then we've got
The
rentals.
next one is rentals.
So it's in regards to long-term rentals is what we're kind of talking about here, because in FARBAR, the long-term rentals is built into the contract, whereas in CRSP, you'd have to add this addendum. The rental addendum in CRSP actually includes post-closing
I like that word.
occupancy.
Is that Latin too?
Yeah, it was. Post-closing occupancy by the seller, pre-closing occupancy by the buyer, or these existing tenant.
Yeah, so that's kind of the cool thing about the CRSP addendum is that it has all three scenarios, whereas in FARBAR you have to do another addendum.
There's a separate one for
if you're doing
pre-occupancy.
pre and post closing occupancy. So that's kind of cool that they wrap it all into one under CRSP. But yes, if it's a long-term rental, so more than 6 months, there's all these rights between buyer and seller where buyer gets the opportunity to review the leases and can cancel within so many days of reviewing the leases. That's all built into FERCTA. It's a separate addenda that you have to include if it's CRSP. So make sure you understand if there's long-term rental in place with some tenants,
You're gonna have
because
to
that
add
is going to
this.
matter. Yep, absolutely.
You need to be aware of it either way, because you're going to have to provide the buyer with a copy of the lease. Y'all just
Yes.
be careful out there.
And as we have said before, if it's short-term rentals, that's a whole different ball of wax. And that's where you need to get an attorney involved. Hey, I'm a lawyer, I can help. We also have Nathan and Allison in our company that are also lawyers. But that's where we can help draft the language to address what happens with the short-term rentals. Because if you don't, you could get stuck where suddenly the reservations are moved as soon as it's under contract, because the contract doesn't state what happens to those reservations and who owns those reservations from contract to closing. Anyway, whole nother topic, not for today.
And, well, you think you went over that in episode 2 or 3 of this series of
Yes.
your horror story with
Yes,
that
I
one.
did. So refer back and watch that if you haven't already. So let's talk about the right to inspect addendum next.
Okay, sure.
So there's a strategy call where you can use this. So first of all, right now, the standard FARBAR and CRSP contract just have an inspection period, which
Right.
we discussed at length last episode. That's not a right to cancel. You have to jump through a bunch of hoops if the repair limits or exceed the repair allowance. And then only in certain circumstances can the buyer cancel if the seller doesn't do certain things. Again, last episode. Under
And we
the
have
right
to have licensed inspectors.
Yes, exactly. But if you do the right to inspect, right to cancel addendum, which is available for both, then it gives buyer an open window, due diligence window, to inspect the property, and the buyer can back out for any reason whatsoever. Buyer's total discretion.
Yeah, their sole discretion. And that kind of turns your contract into an as-is, but it doesn't say the word as-is on the front
Right.
page of the contract. And so if a seller is refusing to take any offers on an as-is, you can take a residential contract for sale and purchase and include that addendum, and you might be able to sneak it in there and get away with it.
Yeah, you could. It just depends on who's on the agent on the other side and or the seller, depending on how well versed they are with that. But yeah, that's a creative way of turning a regular contract into an as-is with that right to cancel power, because that's pretty strong, and that's the one thing I like about the as-is is that it's already built in. So I can't tell you how many times I've had phone calls recently about a buyer wanting to get out because they don't like the condition of the property, but they're subject to that inspection period versus having an absolute right to cancel. So anyway, an important addendum to be aware of.
Okay, so I would like to go over now the condominium and homeowners association riders, or addenda, depending on the contract. So if you have a piece of property in, let's say, Sandestin, a condo, you're going to need both. You're going to need the HOA rider and the condo rider.
Yeah, great point.
I see it a lot where they don't add both, but you do need both.
Because there's multiple levels at that neighborhood.
There are, or seascape, or
resort, yeah.
So, on the condo rider, something that I've seen get missed and litigation had to happen because of it. It states that the seller is not aware of any pending or levied special assessments other than blank. And fill it out, and then it can say, you choose a box that says either the buyer or the seller will pay installments due after closing.
Yep.
If that is left blank, there's a big, there's a bolded area here that says that if levied or pending assessments exist as of, this date, and they were not disclosed, the seller will pay it in full at the time of closing. So, if the seller just wasn't aware, if he didn't attend any HOA meetings or read the minutes, and just honestly didn't know about it, and then we get the estoppel in and there is a big special assessment that's pending, that's due. I mean, it says pending or levied. So it could have been discussed in the minutes, and that still is considered pending. Like, they know it's coming down the line.
Right.
So be aware that language is in here. And I suggest that if you have, especially a condominium association, because that's where these big special assessments come from, get copies of the last 12 months of minutes and read through them and just make sure.
Yeah, because from a legal standpoint, if it's in the minutes, then you're deemed to have knowledge. It's constructive knowledge, whether you have actual knowledge or not. So as an owner, you can't claim ignorance, because if it's discussed at the meeting and it's in the minutes, it's assumed that the members are reading the minutes, so they're aware of what's going on in their association. And despite that assumption, it's constructive knowledge. So yeah, you need to go back and look through.
And there's some hefty special assessments that we're seeing these days. I know there's a condo complex on Gulf Shore Drive, and they're talking in the $80,000 per unit right now.
Yeah, steep. So that makes a big difference when it comes to this section.
Yeah. So read your minutes. Make sure you include both homeowners association and condo association addenda if needed.
Applicable. Yep. And so listing agents, be especially aware. I mean, granted, anyone who's done real estate in this area for a while knows the different developments and the different levels of each development. But if you're new to real estate and you don't know the areas that well, make sure you figure that out. Or Ashley and the rest of our closers are really well versed on that, so you can ask us ahead of time and we'll kind of guide you through it.
Yep, that's for sure.
All right.
Okay, and then another one that gets people caught up quite a bit that I see is the VA rider for FARBAR versus the VA addendum for CRSP. So the FARBAR VA addendum says that the seller shall pay for the WDO inspection, tax service underwriting, and document preparation fees required by the lender. The CRSP does not have any of that. So if you get an offer with a VA rider, FARBAR, you need to know that your seller is going to pay these fees, and they can be pretty hefty. I've seen lenders get kind of savvy with this, and if they know the seller is paying the underwriting fee, that underwriting fee instead of $300 is $895, because it's not their borrower that's having to pay it, it's the seller.
Yeah.
And I've seen some savvy agents who will, in additional terms, say, all costs listed in Rider E section 4A will be paid by buyer, or scratch through it and have everybody initial. But just last week we had an agent, we sent out an ALTA right before closing, and she asked why all these fees were on the sellers, and we were like,
it's in the contract.
It's right here.
Yeah.
And she said she'd never seen that before. It's like, this has been out since 2015. Maybe she didn't do a lot of VA loans, but it's a thing. So beware. It's in FARBAR, not in CRSP.
Yeah.
Make sure you read these attachments before you attach them.
Exactly. It's really important. A lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to the addenda because they're in the back, but they're really important. I mean, that's a great example as to why. So you got to really be familiar, because the last thing you want is for a really savvy agent to be on one side and a less savvy agent to be on the other. That savvy agent's going to take advantage.
They are,
every time.
And then your client's the one that's going to suffer.
Yeah.
And
well, maybe your commission too.
And that can happen. Yes. And then I just have like a favorite one that I wish I saw more, and that's the post-occupancy by the seller. Like, especially if you've got a seller who's selling on one day and buying on the same day, simultaneous closings. Like if you give the seller, if they give themselves by asking for this addendum to be added, like an additional 3 days, they're not spending money on the movers until they have the money in their account.
Yep.
They're still able to close on their new purchase, and they have some time. It's not like a huge rush stress fest.
Yeah.
I wish I saw it more, and you never see it.
Which is odd, because you would think it would be included, because it's so crazy to try to close and move in all on, and there could be delays.
And especially
the
here, we have
lender
a
doesn't
lot of
get
people
something done,
that don't
and you
even
have to
live
extend
here.
it. Right.
They're not
exactly.
They're not moving in tomorrow. Just go ahead and give yourself a little bit of time.
Well, how many times have we had buyers that driving down in a moving truck from out of state, only for the closing to get pushed a couple days because of lender issues, and they're having to find a hotel and park their moving truck somewhere because they couldn't move in on the closing date as originally scheduled.
A lot of times.
So, yeah.
But if they know ahead of time, we're going to make this purchase, we're not going to move into it for 3 days, we're going to give these people time, then you've kind of given the buyer also less stress.
Exactly. And some of these actually have situations to where the post-closing occupancy could be months, in which case it calls for a lease to be executed between the parties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's something us lawyers can help with, so just be aware of that as well. All right, seller financing. That's one that we see pretty common, and that's where obviously the seller is going to agree to finance the purchase. And so typically you want to have a note, a mortgage, maybe a personal guarantee, depending on how the loan is structured. And so that is something that we can draft. It's through the law firm, so it's an additional charge, but we have lots of experience of drafting those seller financing loan documents. So if you have a seller finance deal, make sure you include that addendum, and then we can
give
help.
us the terms, and we can
That's right.
get the documents prepared.
Yep. And we do give a discount on legal fees if it's for closing that we're handling, so there is that benefit. All right.
I think those were like my most important ones to hit during this.
Yeah, I think we covered some good ground.
Yeah, and we're done. FARBAR versus CRSP.
We did it.
5 episodes in our 3-part series.
It's a 3+2 part series, right? So
hopefully y'all got something out of it.
Yeah, and of course, if you have any questions, there's kick-out clauses and all that kind of stuff too that's also addressed. And if we didn't cover that today due to lack of time, but if you have any questions on any of that stuff, we're happy to answer those questions. And again, we're always asking for feedback. So if you want a specific episode on something in particular with regards to either contract, you want us to dig in deeper, let us know. We'll be happy to do that. We're always looking for cool guests to come on.
We haven't had any cool guests in a long time.
I think next time we're going to bring Nathan.
Okay, introduce him to the world.
Yep, we'll let him talk about FERCTA with us.
Okay.
Everyone knows him from his prior company, but he's new to ECTS and the law firm, so we're excited to.
Yeah, we're happy to have him.
And special announcement. We just found out that the FARBAR contract and addenda are going to be updated as of November of this year. So
we're going to have we'll probably do like a red line discussion here, but also we'd be happy to take a class into your office, or y'all come here and we can sit down and really hash it out.
Yep. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for now. Be sure to like us on social media. We're everywhere, pretty much. And like I said, reach out if you have any questions or feedback. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.
And make sure to smash the like button so I can hear the ticker tick, 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 tick.
That's right. Smash that like button. All right. Until next time. Sayonara.